Joining me is someone who combed through the Greens policy in a fascinating article today for the Daily Telegraph. James Morrow is the Telegraph's federal political editor and co-host of Outsiders on Sky News every Sunday. James, a great article today. Now, it seems to me that the Greens now are barely even pretending that they can pay for all this. How do they get away with it? That's the frightening thing.
Well, they get away with it for two reasons, Andrew. Number one, everybody just doesn't take them seriously. They don't take the threat of the Greens seriously, and the threat that they might wind up having the balance in a hung parliament seriously, although I think that is starting to change now. But also the other reason, of course, is that, much of the media is sympathetic to the Greens and also just takes in this sort of general vibe about them that, they're trying to do the right thing. They want to save the planet. They want to solve racism. They want to do all these things. So we shouldn't really ask too many questions about it. But what I found is that when you start to scratch the surface of these policies, you are talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in policies. And I'm talking about everything from relatively small things, like $1 billion for something called the Australian Stories Fund, which is to fund more filmmaking and things like that, to giving $200,000 compensation to every single member of the stolen generation, regardless of what trauma they may have suffered. Now, the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare says there's 33,000 of these people out there, according to the latest survey. You're talking about, many, many more billions of dollars there, and that's before we even get to the plans to build 1 million dwellings to solve the housing crisis at a cost of $330,000 apiece. Now, you only have to look across the ditch to New Zealand, where promises to do similar sorts of things have fallen in a heap, to know how that goes.
It's just extraordinary to me. And what frightens me, James, is when Adam Band gave a lecture at the National Press Club, what was it, a week or two ago, I didn't hear any of this being teased out. I didn't hear any of it being debated. I mean, it's nonsense on stilts. If ever followed, if they ever in the position to force this through as a price for supporting Labor, I mean, they'd beggar the country. And
well,
yet, no questioning. Why is that?
Well, again, it is, because there's, the old rule, no enemies to my left. So those on the left aren't going to question the Greens' policies, and that includes much of the ABC and, much, I'm afraid, of the commercial media as well. But, it's just telling that at that press club address, Andrew, the thing that did make the headline was the one thing where he said, oh, well, Google it, mate, about the wage price index. And when that question was asked, as if, the questioners, the reporters, the journalists are the ones who are doing the wrong thing by actually trying to hold people to account. That's the dangerous thing that we're seeing, not just with the Greens, but across this entire election cycle.
James, I'm going to go after the break through the latest signs of Labor leader Anthony Albanese's political meltdown. I'll go through the latest mistakes and what it's done to his poll numbers and all that. But the crowd at Bluesfest on the weekend let him know big time he'd made a mistake thinking that he would get a warm welcome as he introduced Jimmy Barnes. Have a listen.
Pay no respect to elders past and present, and what we want is to recognise First Nations people in our Constitution. Australians have been magnificent over the last couple of years, and what we want is a government that backs the arts sector. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Jimmy Barnes.
James, two things about that. One is that the boos turned to cheers when he decided to throw money at the arts crowd. Oh, suddenly,
hey, there
cheers,
we go, yeah.
Our
Cha-ching.
money. Yeah, exactly. Well, but the other thing is, there's more at the start where the booing, that booing went on for a long time. Well, I couldn't show the whole lot. What Labor campaign officials thought that this stunt would be a vote winner? To me, that casts the whole thing is the problem not just with Albanese, it's with his staff.
Well, and it's with his staff, and it's with this whole attitude that I think that they've had going into this, that this was going to be a coronation, not a contest. And so they would have booked this ages ago, I think, and said, oh, well, this will be great. He'll go to Bluesfest. He's hip. He likes to DJ. He's down with the kids. He quotes the Ramones in his speeches. This will be great. But it's this sort of cluelessness in the way they've organized the campaign. And it is just, I think, Andrew, we are seeing this guy shrinking before our very eyes because he just seems to become a smaller and smaller candidate here every single day, you know, with not just getting booed at Bluesfest. I mean, sure, a crowd will always boo a politician, but, you know, again, this may have been something else entirely, but just, you know, inability to just get through a day without having a stumble. You've got to think that the Labour campaign is really rattled at this point.
We'll discuss that after the break. I've got some amazing examples. James Morrow, thank you so much for joining me.